This session is in partnership with Rwanda Development Board and also Africa Business Magazine. And really, this year's Africa Initiative is made possible through our wonderful partners like the Rwanda Development Board. And we will have programming throughout the 2 days that will cover investment realities and the important homegrown solutions that are uniquely Rwandan, but serve as a model for economic sustainability across the region and around the world. We've got a great panel lined up, and while we're finishing some of the technical issues, we're going to bring on who we have available right now. So please welcome Omar Ben Yedder, Managing Director for African Business Magazine, Israel Bimpe, Director for Africa Sales at Zipline, and Clare Akamanzi, CEO of Rwanda Development Board. We will shortly have Paula Ingabire joining, as well as Nick Barigye. Omar, over to you.
Thank you very much. Good morning, good afternoon. Great to have you all on board. I'm delighted to be moderating this session. As you said, we're going to be packing a lot of content in 30 minutes, so I won't hopefully speak too long. The session was called Investing in the Future of Rwanda. And for me, we could have called it Investing in the Future because Rwanda is the future. We now look at Rwanda for guidance, for foresight. They've really, in the past 10, 15 years that I've been following the country, they're really showing us the way in terms of a knowledge economy, in terms of how to create a dynamic investment climate, how to overcome problems and challenges, and to create solutions that are not only countrywide, but regional and continental wide. So I'm delighted to be moderating this session and hearing from our panel of experts. We'll start with Clare, an old friend who I've known for many years, and who's the one driving this dynamism in the country. So there's one question that I wanted to ask you, and unfortunately it does relate to COVID, just in terms of from a strategic perspective. So we've seen a lot of people talk about self-reliance. We've seen how supply chains will change because of COVID, that people no longer want to depend on complex global supply chains. So has COVID changed anything in terms of your strategy as a country and at the RDB in terms of what type of investment, what type of sectors you want to be promoting in the country? What are your strategic sectors that you'll be looking at?
Thank you very much, Omar, and indeed it's very good to see you again. Like many countries, Rwanda has been affected by COVID-19, and COVID-19 came at a time when Rwanda was sustaining a very high growth rate. We finished 2019 with an economic GDP growth rate of 9.4%, which is among the highest growth rates that we've seen, not just in the continent, but also globally. And so the first interaction that we see from COVID-19 is how we sustain that high economic growth rate going forward, but also how we implement what we've learned from COVID-19. As you correctly said, when it did happen, it did interfere with supply chains for Rwanda. It did interfere with our manufacturing plans. And we had to make a lot of adjustments in order to sustain what we could within the context of COVID-19. But what we've learned as a country is to identify and define what would be the must-have items in the country, that if COVID-19 or any other crisis happened, we should have enough production in the country. And so we've identified a list of products, right from food items that we need produced in the country, that whether or not we have a crisis, these are items that you can never do without. We've looked at hygiene and sanitary towels as sanitary items. We've seen detergents, for example. We've seen consumer products and household goods that are very important for our day-to-day lives. And so we've identified those very, very specific items that we cannot do without as a continent and as a country and focus on their production. Now, we learned that that's possible from COVID-19 because when COVID-19 started, we were not producing sanitizers, for example. We're not producing masks in the country. But today, we're self-sufficient for both sanitizers and also masks because we're producing those in the country. And so being able to have that short-term reaction on producing the key items or must-have items that we have in the country, but also not forgetting the long term. And even if you talk about self-reliance or self-sufficiency, every country will still need to rely on each other. That's why regional integration and international trade remains very important. But for us as a country, how do you build the must-have items that you cannot do without and produce those in the country? But how do you sustain global integration, global trade? Because you cannot do everything, or you can't produce everything you want in the country. So for us going forward, we're going to be focusing on 4 key projects that are going to drive our sustainability in the future. Number 1 is Made in Rwanda program that we have, which is as much as possible produce those products that we need and are in our must-have items, but also that we can be competitive in producing in the country. Number 2, we are also going to be growing our Kigali International Financial Center, which we've just started through an organization called the Rwanda Finance. So it's really positioning Rwanda as an African financial center where global capital can come and invest in African projects through Kigali. The third one is continuing our Visit Rwanda program, which is really promoting tourism and promoting events in the long term beyond COVID-19. And we have one major flagship project called the Bugesera International Airport, which is going to be growing the passengers from Rwanda from 1 million to 7 million. And that's the scope of the project with Qatar Airways. And so that's going to be a flagship project for sustainability in the future. And the last one is really a program we call Start in Rwanda, which is really promoting Rwanda as a place to start ideas, innovations. And I'm sure the Minister of ICT and Innovation, Minister Paula, will talk about that. And I'm sure Israel will be giving us a real example of how you can start in Rwanda, innovate, and then scale up to the rest of the world. So for us, the future is going to be growing these 4 areas as we evolve beyond COVID-19. Thank you, Omar.
Fantastic. Thank you, Claire. So hopefully we'll get Nick to talk to us about Kigali International Finance Center. That's, we had a big announcement last week with Tijan Chiam joining that board. But if I had one more question to ask you, actually, is that you seem to be playing a regional role as well. And with the AFCFTA next year, maybe a continental one. So we've seen Royal DMS, for example, opening plants in Rwanda, but not necessarily just to service the local economy, but to service the regional one. I'm sure that the VW, when they also invested a couple of years ago, that's the philosophy, or that's the rationale behind their investments. So can you talk to us a little bit about that sort of regional scope or regional market that you intend to service out of Rwanda, or continental for that matter?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so first of all, I think that where Rwanda is located, we are right at the heart of Africa. To go east, west, north, or south is a maximum of 4 hours. So it's a really accessible place. And we intend to optimize our location and service the whole continent. So every product or every service or every project or every product that we are producing or making or promoting in Rwanda is very much a place where you incubate that idea, you refine it. But really what we encourage our entrepreneurs and business people is to think continental, to look at Rwanda as a place where you'll find the right business environment. Today, we're ranked among the top easiest places to do business in the world. We are top 40 globally, ranking 38th. And on the African continent, we are second. We have a very young, dynamic population. We're a very safe country. We're always ranked among the safest countries in the world, not just in Africa. We are very intolerant of corruption. And so the governance framework is going to be very easy to interact with. And so what we tell business people is come, take advantage of all this that we put. We are all very low carbon green country as well. And we're very committed government and leadership, an organization like the Rwanda Development Board, whose job is really to make your life easy as you understand what you want to do, not just in our country, but the continent as well. So our philosophy is use our country as a test bed, use our country as a starting point, but definitely think and plan continental.
Fantastic. So you've mentioned some of the comparative and competitive advantages that you've got. I'd just like to ask you one last question before going to the other panelists, Claire, if you don't mind. So what we've seen in China and when it's been very successful over the past 30 years is when investors have come, you've also had that knowledge transfer. So I don't want to call them conditionalities, but is that within your strategy ultimately to ensure that there is a knowledge transfer with everything that investors bring to the table?
Absolutely. So, and we do that at 2 levels. One is to really work with the business environment to understand what they need in terms of the skills that they want for their projects. And so we plan in our education programs, but also in our bridging programs that we implement to really avail the skills that investors want, so that when they come into the country, it's easy to do the knowledge transfer because they're working with skills that can be adapted into their businesses. And so we don't restrict businesses. If they need skills that are not available in the country, we allow them. And that takes me to the second policy, which is our immigration policy, which we use to really support not just knowledge transfer, but also to support investors to bring the skills that may not be yet available in the country. And so we make it easy to get a work permit if you belong to a category of skills that we need. But at the same time, when we are negotiating with investors, we discuss with them specific programs that they will put in place together with us to transfer the skills. And it's on a very practical, pragmatic. We don't force them to do what doesn't make sense for them commercially, or what's not viable for them commercially. But we discuss with them and we agree on the best way to actually bring their skills and also use their skills to really increase the knowledge base in the country. So that's something that we're very pragmatic about. But at the same time, the government invests a lot of money, a lot of resources to actually make sure that our people are available and skilled enough to learn from investors and for the knowledge transfer to happen.
Fantastic. Thank you, Claire. Honourable Minister Paula, if I can go to you next, in terms of staying on that theme of knowledge and creating a dynamic knowledge economy. Ultimately, what we've seen over the past 9 months is that tech is at the center of everything. We need it more than ever. So I know that Rwanda is home to Smart Africa, many incubators, and many other initiatives. And really, you're taking the lead, and you're really putting Africa on the tech map, so to speak. So how's the ministry going about creating that knowledge economy and a highly digitized society?
Thanks, Omar. And like you rightly said, I think this has been, with the pandemic, it's been a reminder of how digital technologies are very essential in really making sure that many of the economies remain afloat, even as we respond and put in place these prevention measures. And as you rightly said, the vision of Rwanda of becoming a knowledge-based economy is supported by a strategy to be an innovation-driven and highly digitized society. So ICT or digital technologies are a linchpin of our plans to transform into a knowledge-based, innovation-driven economy. Even from the new definition of a knowledge-based economy, what we see is that digital technologies are very instrumental in how we acquire, create, and disseminate knowledge effectively. And so that is why Rwanda has strategically prioritized ICT as a means to accelerate growth, but also to reduce poverty. And for us to be able to do that, the government of Rwanda, of course, through the ministry and in collaboration with different partners, especially within the private sector, has invested massively in building the right infrastructure, the skills, and as well as the institutional frameworks that include favorable policies and laws that will provide an environment that is conducive to transforming Rwanda into a knowledge-based economy. And so these three things, infrastructure, skills, institutional frameworks, are some of the things over the past decades that the government has been investing in and building, from providing this conducive environment, from the establishment of higher learning institutions to the laying of fiber optic cable nationwide. And so all these really are some of the things that we've been working on. And when you look at what we call the digital economy index, there are things that stand out and that also resonate with some of the priorities that we've had over the last decade, which are connectivity, human capital development, the use of internet services, as well as digital public services. And these are areas where, again, giving you very quick examples, when you look at infrastructure, our ability to access international bandwidth has grown tenfold over the last 5 years. And also the rolling out of fiber optic cable that connects all the 30 districts of the country, but also that allows that at least 50% of our population is within at least 10 kilometers of reach of the transmission network. And so it's not just the fiber optic cable, it's also really thinking about the other kind of infrastructure like devices. Government of Rwanda has been working heavily to launch some new schemes that are really targeted around affordability of devices. We've been able, with the support of the Rwanda Development Board, we've been able to boost local manufacturing efforts by attracting some of the investors like Mara to assemble smartphones. And best of this, really thinking about some of the affordability schemes that will allow for many of the Rwandan households to own a smartphone, which in turn becomes a tool that they can use to really be part of this digital economy. The other element, of course, of a knowledge-based economy is really the demand for skilled labor. And so even when you look at it from a tech perspective, I think the gaps are big. And so that's why from interventions of really building and embedding digital skills and training in our national education system to really providing training programs for highly specialized ICT skills, all these interventions have been designed to bridge the prevailing digital skills gap that already exists within the economy. And of course, the last one is what I talked about, which is really institutional frameworks that are supportive of a local innovation and entrepreneurship ecosystem. Today, we are putting in place the Startup Act, putting in place a nationwide innovation policy that is not strictly looking at tech-enabled innovations, but really looking at innovation more holistically, because that's the kind of culture that you need to build for you to be able to unlock the potential of a knowledge-based economy. But that is all supported by efforts of putting in place different accelerators, incubators that are really going to nurture that kind of skill set. But going forward, I also wanted to just speak to that, because there's what we've done, which is obviously not enough, but there's also what we need to be doing going forward, which is really, especially in the age of big data, where we are now building a culture of data-driven policy making and implementation approaches that are definitely going to improve the effectiveness of the government programs and policies that we have in place. And so this will cover activities from research to innovation-related activities, piloting. Claire did speak about the proof of concept strategy that we have, which really is to attract innovators from across the world, from across Africa, give them the right environment where they can test. Rwanda becomes a test bed for some of these solutions that are responding to challenges that are not just specific to Rwanda, but specific to, that resonate with the larger population within the continent. And so these are some of the efforts that are already going on. And of course, lastly, it's really building that efficient innovation system that really looks at the farms, research centers. Today, we've attracted the likes of the Africa Institute for Mathematical Sciences, Carnegie Mellon University, ALU, different research centers. And all this really is geared towards building the much required skills that is really going to contribute to our vision of becoming a knowledge-based economy. Thanks, Omar.
Fantastic, Honourable Minister, thank you. So Israel, maybe we go to you. And so we've heard a few things here, but what attracted you to Rwanda? Was it the regulatory environment? Was it the support framework that you found? Was it the skills, the costs? And tell us a little bit about your experience ultimately.
I would say it's all of the above. And thanks so much, Omar, for having me. I think when Zipline was really seeking to be able to launch the innovation that they were creating, one of the first things they bumped into was being at the intersection of very highly sensitive industries. One is healthcare, and the other is aviation. And we really needed to be in a place where we are able to launch at a significant scale, not only making 1 or 2 flights, but be able to operate at close enough to a national scale, and then be able to have a partner who will really use the service for real life needs. And that's how, coming to Rwanda, we were able to find, the proof of concept initiative that was allowing us to be able to both launch from a regulatory environment that is open enough, that is performance-based, and then creating the regulation at a later stage. But also we found a very able partner in the Ministry of Health to be able to allow us to operate in real-life events, so that the technology is not only proven from a technology point of view, but also from a service and an impact point of view, to the impact that it can have either on patients, on the health system. And in addition to that, I think what is even more crucial is finding a platform where all the different stakeholders in the government or outside the government come together. I think when you are operating a drone innovation across a national airspace, you have to really bring all aviation industry stakeholders together. You have to bring security organs together. You have to bring, technology regulators together. So, the government kind of established that platform. They were ready and they were existent, and it was an easy way to communicate and, we were able to reach everyone in one room, I would say, and that allowed Zipline to scale and grow very rapidly. So far in 4 years, Zipline has gone on to operate in Ghana, in the US, and has signed service agreements in other countries in Asia and in Africa, and we were able to really scale fast enough. And that's a continuous process. And because now, apart from just proving that concept, taking it to scale in Rwanda and outside Rwanda, we are really thinking about this is a technology that has never been seen before. And how can Rwanda continue leading? And we are seeing a government engagement from all types of stakeholders. As I told you, the platform that exists, we have the Ministry of Agriculture coming to Zipline and say, can we test delivering bull semen with this? Can we, the Ministry of Health is taking it one step further given the pandemic on can we really look at how can this be used for home deliveries, things that are thought to be for developed countries, but that can solve so many problems that we have locally ourselves. So, the last thing that both Minister Paula mentioned and the CEO Clare mentioned as well is skills. I think Zipline found ready engineers, ready health professionals like myself who were really ready to take on the challenge, to take Zipline from just, the ingenuity that the people put in and really make it work in our context in Rwanda and be able to scale it across the continent, which I've been doing as a Rwandan who started with Zipline 2 years ago, and now really taking it across the continent in other countries to be able to scale there. So I think that's a bit about our story and what we could say. And it remains a place for us to be able to see what not only our technology, but the drone industry more broadly could be able to scale into, and not only in healthcare, but many more of the applications and take that to the rest of the world.
Fantastic. Thank you, Israel. I'd like to go to Nick. I believe Nick's on the line with us. There's no video, but I think he's on the line on the audio. So the big news story last week, the big announcement, let's say, was that Tidjane Thiam had been brought to chair the board of the Rwanda Finance, and so I wanted to understand really what you're trying to do with the International Financial Center of Rwanda. What's the vision there, and what do you think Tidjane will bring to the table?
Good afternoon, Omar, and good afternoon to all the other panelists and our audience. Let's start with the appointment of the board. For every company, it's important to have strong governance, because the board is supposed to give not only strong governance, but also to give guidance, and especially for the eminent personalities that we have on our board to be able to leverage their networks. So that's the expectation that we have on the board that we have. Now, as to what Rwanda Finance as a company we are mandated to do, it's to promote and develop Kigali International Financial Center. Now, the creation of an international finance is complementary to all the government of Rwanda initiatives. So we are looking to be a preferred financial center for international investments in Africa. That means to attract investments within Rwanda, but also promote cross-border investments. To be able to do that, we've been undertaking a number of initiatives that are grouped under 3 pillars. One is putting in place a strong legal and regulatory framework. This framework calls for laws that enable us to have sophisticated products such as a protected sale company, limited partnerships, trusts, foundations, headquarters. And then the other important aspect of the work that we are doing is regards tax, having a tax policy framework that is compliant to international standards. We've put in place incentives that facilitate the structuring of those investments, and also continuing to grow our treaty network so as to be able to facilitate cross-border trade. And then the other third piece that is equally important concerns skills and capacity development for the financial services sector. We are working on upskilling as well as attracting important skills that complement those that are already existent within our financial services sector. Then the other important activity that we do, and I thank you for hosting us on this important event, is the promotion of the ecosystem. We continue to engage on both international forums as well as carrying out domestic events to create awareness of the work that we are doing. We also, most importantly, doing strategic partnerships. We recently joined the World Alliance of International Financial Centers. We've signed MOUs with financial centers in Africa, such as the Casablanca Financial City Authority, as well as Jersey Finance. And this is very important. I think one of the lessons we are learning as a result of the global pandemic is that you can't go it alone. So for us as Rwanda Finance and as Kigali International Financial Center, strategic partnerships are extremely important so as to be able to facilitate the flow of trade and investments within Rwanda and across Africa. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Nick. So it's very interesting in terms of what you're trying to do, but just for me to understand it better, so you signed something with Jersey Finance, but will you be competing with Mauritius, Jersey, Luxembourg, or how do you see yourself operating? Will companies be basing their funds and their and channeling their investments through Rwanda, or am I misreading you?
The intention here is not to, I won't say to compete, it's rather to collaborate. What we are seeing, the need from investors is, for example, if you're an international bank that is based into Jersey, you want to have a subsidiary, say in Kigali International Financial Center, to invest in Kigali, but also be able to invest in another jurisdiction such as Nairobi. So in that case, we are not talking about competition, and that's why we are joining the World Alliance of International Financial Centers, because we believe we attain more through collaboration rather than competition.
Fantastic. We're quickly running out of time. Claire, if I may go back to you. So in terms of, Nick spoke of incentives, obviously creating the right governance and framework. But in terms of incentives, what's Rwanda's philosophy or policy in terms of tax incentives in different sectors? Or do you rather believe in creating the right framework, being able to be agile, assisting companies, and making sure that they've got the skills that they require?
Thank you, Mar. And maybe just to complement on what Nick said, when we attract investors, when we go all over the world, many investors tell us that they would like to find the right environment through which they can invest their money in Africa. And so we do see that even though there are many other financial centers all over the world, we see that there is a gap, and that investors are asking for a place within the continent that they can build or they can bring their capital through. So we think Rwanda is really coming to fill a need that is very clearly there. Back to your question on incentives. So we believe that that a country that is attractive for which Rwanda is positioning itself, you need to be attractive both from the fiscal but also the non-fiscal components that investors are looking to invest. So Rwanda looks at this whole attractiveness as an ecosystem. So we invest in every aspect of the ecosystem. And let me just take you through the ecosystem, including the fiscal part of the ecosystem. Number one, we know that investors want to come to a country that is safe and that whose safety can be banked on for the long term, because they're investing money for 10 years or 20 years. So Rwanda has invested in institutions as well as all the policies to ensure that your money, your property, or your person is safe when you come to Rwanda. Number two is infrastructure. When investors come, they want to find that they have the road network, the energy network, the broadband infrastructure available and competitive. And we've invested a lot of resources as a government to make sure that our infrastructure is very competitive. Number three is skills, making sure that you have the right people. And you've talked about that. I won't even belabor the point on that point. But also stability, both macroeconomic and political stability. Again, we've invested so much, and that's why Rwanda is always ranked among the most stable nations. But the last component is also the fiscal incentives. We also care about your bottom line. If you come and you're investing a lot of money, especially in the initial years, you want to make sure that you're able to recover your money. And so we give tax incentives. For example, we remove import duties and VAT on equipment, raw materials, and machinery for any project that comes into the country. We give you tax holidays. If you invest $50 million and more in our country, you get a 7-year tax holiday. And if you are in a very strategic sector like exports or ICT or energy, we'll give you a reduced rate for corporate income tax from 30% to 15%. So those are some of the examples that we have. We also have a zero corporate income tax for headquarters if you come to Rwanda. But what is interesting that I really want to share with the business people on the call is that we have a new investment code that has just been approved by our cabinet. It's currently in Parliament. It's going to be giving even a lot more than what I just said in terms of fiscal incentives. So we look at it as an ecosystem, and comprehensively we want to become competitive in each part of the ecosystem, because one part alone is not enough. And again, Rwanda is very much open to business, and we are always improving our offering. It can only get better every year. That's all I can tell investors on the call today.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Claire. Thank you to all my panelists. I've been asked to wrap this up. So having been to Rwanda for the past 10, 15 years, I can tell you that they don't just talk the talk, but they definitely do walk the walk. There's long-term vision there with short-term pragmatism, which has been explained by our panelists here and demonstrated by our panelists. And it's a performance-based economy where it's about getting things done and making sure that people can get a return on investments, and they'll work with you towards that. Thank you very much to our panelists, and thank you to the organizers for having us on this morning's opening panel. Thank you.